The following is a LIBRAVOX recording. The Social Contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Book 1. My purpose is to consider if, in political society, there can be any legitimate and sure principle of government, taking men as they are, and laws as they might be. In this inquiry I shall try always to bring together what right permits with what interest prescribes, so that justice and utility are in no way divided. I start without seeking to prove the importance of my subject. I may be asked whether I am a prince or a legislator, that I should be writing about politics. I answer no, and indeed that is my reason for doing so. If I were a prince or a legislator, I would not waste my time saying what ought to be done. I should do it or keep silent. Born as I was the citizen of a free state and a member of its sovereign body, the very right to vote imposes on me the duty to instruct myself in public affairs, however little influence my voice may have in them. And whenever I reflect upon governments, I am happy to find that my studies always give me fresh reasons for admiring that of my own country. Chapter 1. The subject of Book 1. Man was born free, and he is everywhere in chains. Those who think themselves the masters of others are indeed greater slaves than they. How did this transformation come about? I do not know. How can it be made legitimate? That question I believe I can answer. If I were to consider only force and the effects of force, I would say, so long as a people is constrained to obey, and obey, it does well. But as soon as it can shake off the yoke and shake it off, it does better, for since it regains its freedom by the same right as that which removed it. A people is either justified in taking back its freedom, or there is no justifying those who took it away. But the social order is a sacred right, which serves as a basis for all other rights. And as it is not a natural right, it must be one founded on covenants. The problem is to determine what those covenants are. But before we pass on to that question, I must substantiate what I have so far said. Chapter 2. The First Societies. Chapter 2. The First Societies. The oldest of all societies, and the only natural one, is that of the family. Yet children remain tied to their father by nature only so long as they need him for their preservation. As soon as this need ends, the natural bond is dissolved. Once the children are freed from the obedience they owe their father, and the father is freed from their responsibilities toward them, both parties equally regain their independence. If they continue to remain united, it is no longer nature but their own choice which unites them, and the family as such is kept in being only by agreement. This common liberty is a consequence of man's nature. Man's first law is to watch over his own preservation. His first care he owes to himself. And as soon as he reaches the age of reason, he becomes the only judge of the best means to preserve himself. He becomes his own master. The family may therefore perhaps be seen as the first model of political societies, The head of the state bears the image of the father, the people the image of his children, and all, being born free and equal, surround their freedom only when they see advantage in doing so. The only difference is that in the family, a father's love for his children repays him for the care he bestows on them, while in that state where the ruler can have no such feeling for his people, the pleasure of commanding must take the place of love. Grotius denies that all human government is established for the benefits of the governed, and he cites the example of slavery. His characteristic method of reasoning is always to offer fact as a proof of right. It is possible to imagine a more logical method, but not one more favorable to tyrants. According to Grotius, therefore, it is doubtful whether humanity belongs to 100 men, or whether these 100 men belong to humanity, though he seems throughout his book to learn to the first of these views, which is also that of Hobbes. These authors show us the human race divided into herds of cattle, each with a master who preserves it only in order to devour its members. Just as a shepherd possesses a nature superior to that of his flock, so do those shepherds of men, their rulers, have a nature superior to that of their people. Or so we are told by Philo, the Emperor Caligula argued, concluding reasonably enough on this same analogy that kings were gods, or alternatively that the people were animals. The reasoning of Caligula coincides with that of Hobbes and Grotius. Indeed, Aristotle, before any of them, said that men were not at all equal by nature, since some were born for slavery and others were born to be masters. Aristotle was right, but he mistook the effect for the cause. Anyone born in slavery is born for slavery. Nothing is more certain. Slaves in their bondage lose everything, even the desire to be free. They love their servitude, even as the companions of Ulysses loved their life as brutes. But if there are slaves by nature, it is only because there has been slavery against nature. Force made by the first slaves, and their cowardice perpetuates their slavery. I have said nothing of the King Adam or of the Emperor Noah, father of the three great monarchs who shared out the universe between them like the children of Saturn, with whom some authors have identified them. I hope my readers will be grateful for this moderation, for since I am directly descended from one of those princes, and perhaps in the eldest line, how do I know that if the deeds were checked, I might not find myself the legitimate king of the human race? However that may be, there is no gainsaying that Adam was the king of the world, as was Robinson Crusoe of his island, precisely because he was the sole inhabitant. And the great advantage of such an empire was that the monarch, secure upon his throne, had no occasion to fear rebellions, wars, or conspirators. And you might want to take a look at this soundbite right here. Okay, so there are three big errors you're going to need to check when you come back to the file. They are between minute 2 and minute 3, and there's a gap in minute 5 to minute 7. Double check those and make sure that your edits are proper. Do not touch your microphone hookup. I repeat, do not touch the microphone hookup. Click, click, clackety, click. Chapter 3. The Right of the Strongest. The strongest man is never strong enough to be master all of the time, unless he transforms force into right, and obedience into duty. Hence, the right of the strongest, a right that sounds like something intended ironically, but it is actually laid down as a principle. But should we never have this phrase explained? Force is a physical power. I do not see how its effect could produce morality. To yield to force is an act of necessity, not of will. It is, at best, an act of prudence. In what sense can it be a moral duty? Let us grant for a moment that this so-called right exists. I suggest it can only produce a tissue of bewildering nonsense, for once might is made to be right. Cause and effect are reversed, and every force which overcomes another force inherits the right which belonged to the vanquished. As soon as man can disobey with impunity, his disobedience becomes legitimate, and as the strongest is always right, the only problem is how to become the strongest. But what can be the validity of a right which perishes with the force on which it rests? If force compels obedience, there is no need to invoke a duty to obey, and if force ceases to compel obedience, there is no longer any obligation. Thus, the word right adds nothing to what is said by force. It is meaningless. Obey those in power. If this means yield to force, the percept is sound, but superfluous. It will never, I suggest, be violated. All power comes from God, I agree, but so does every disease, and no one forbids us to summon a physician. If I am held up by a robber at the edge of a wood, force compels me to hand over my purse. But if I could somehow contrive to keep the purse from him, would I still be obliged in conscience to surrender it? After all, the pistol in a robber's hand is undoubtedly a power. Surely it must be admitted, then, that might does not make right, and that the duty of obedience is owed only to legitimate powers. Thus, we are constantly led back to my original question. Chapter 4. Slavery. Since no man has any natural authority over his fellows, and since force alone bestows no right, all legitimate authority among men must be based on covenants. Grotius says, if an individual can alienate his freedom and become the slave of a master, why may not a whole people alienate its freedom and become the subject of a king? In this remark, there are several ambiguous words which call for explanation, but let us confine others. Okay. Nourishing subjects, kings, so okay. Fuck. The subject of a king. In this remark, there are several ambiguous words which call for explanation, but let us confine ourselves to one: to alienate. To alienate is to give or sell. A man who becomes the slave of another does not give himself. He sells himself in return for at least a subsistence. But in return, for what could a whole people be said to sell itself? A king, far from nourishing his subjects, draws his nourishment from them, and kings, according to Rabelais, sorry, need more than a little nourishment. How do you say the word? A king, far from nourishing his subjects, draws his nourishment from them, and kings, according to Rabelais, a king, far from nourishing his subjects, draws his nourishment from them, and kings, according to Rabelais, A king, far from nourishing his subjects, draws his nourishment from them, and kings, according to Rabelais, need more than a little nourishment. Do subjects, then, give their persons to the king on condition that he will accept their property as well? If so, I fail to see why they have left to preserve. Fuck. Fuck, shit, piss, shit, shitty, fucking piss. Do subjects then give their persons to the king on condition that he will accept their property as well? If so, I fail to see why they have left. Fuck. If so, I fail to see what they have left to preserve. It will be said that a despot gives his subjects the assurance of civil tranquility. Very well, but what does it profit then? What does it profit them? If those wars against other powers which result from a despot's ambition, if his insubstantial greed and the oppressive demands of his administration cause more desolation than civil strife would cause, what do the people gain if their very condition of civil tranquility is poo-poo-poo-poo? Do chapter 4 again! Obviously, I'm never gonna fucking release this, so LIBRAVOX can suck my fucking balls! You fucking elitist organization full of cocksure assholes! I want to fucking volunteer my time to do something that I like doing in my spare time, and it's not fucking good enough for them? Because it's not fucking loud enough? Turn up your fucking speakers, you morons! How is that a fucking complaint? God, I tested that fucking demo on how many different sound systems, on how many different fucking platforms, 2 different versions of cell phones, fucking 2 different kinds of fucking, oh, I'm fucking mad. I can't even do something in my fucking spare time. This is fucking retarded. I'm fucking seething now. The only reason I wanted to check my damn forum post is to see what my fucking, if my demo got listened to, or if anyone was gonna go, oh yeah, hey, hope to have fun, whatever. Like, fuck. This is fucking stupid. Way to make me feel inadequate. Like,